Hi, I'm Tracy Koga with something short and fun. This is a Hugh Soundbite. It is always so special when you read a book and you are actually in it. Well, maybe not in it, so to speak, but I am so happy and honored that we have Grace Eiko Thomson here, and you are, Grace, an amazing book that you have done, and I guess in honor of your mother, and also, but also I think it's your personal journey too. Am I correct in this book?
For sure. It was something that I have to resolve.
Yes, and the title is so beautiful, and hopefully I don't butcher it, but Chiro Sakura, and maybe tell us more about what that title means to you.
Okay. Well, it's important to me because during the time when Mother was dealing with her whole life, at the end of her life, before the end of her life, she had lost so many members of her family. Like she had lost everybody except my younger sister, myself, and my younger brother. But my younger brother also died before she did. So she had lost her 2 sons and her husband before she died. But during the time that she was dealing with the fact of her life that was totally shattered through internment, because my parents were married in 2930, and my father went to Japan to marry her. He had already been in Canada for a while. And so in marrying, they were expecting to have a good life in Vancouver. And he got himself a good job that was related to what his older brothers were doing, which was the fisher communities of the white, Japanese, and indigenous communities. Mm-hmm. And it was called the Codfish Cooperative Society. And my father became a buyer. So he lived in Vancouver. And I used to see him going to work every morning in a nice 3-piece suit with as a child, I remember the watch that he used to put in his vest pocket. So those are the memories that you have as a child. So all that was destroyed less than a dozen years when they were moved into the internment site. Mm-hmm. So when my mother was towards the end of her life, I think she was very angry, emotionally. She was throwing things around sometimes. Mm-hmm. And my mother was a very educated, incredible woman. So by doing that, I think she resolved herself, her feelings, when she started to write her memoir. But then she remembered the haiku of a Japanese haiku master, Ryokan, and she wrote it in her memoir. And it was, in Japanese, it was Chiro Sakura, which means falling sakura. The remaining sakura is also a falling sakura. So she said, when I realized that I was still living, and that's when she wrote the haiku in her memoir. So for me, that, even though it was a sad use of that haiku, I felt that it just touched me. And so I decided to use that because I was also a descendant of the sakura. So felt that my turn is coming too.
Oh, well, and through this all, Grace, what did you learn? Like, I mean, you talk about certain memories about your father, and obviously, you have good memories of your mother. When you're reading her story and learning more about the history, how did that affect you?
Well, I had always thought that I wanted to leave something for my sons to understand their history because I intermarried. And so, and my mother, both their grandparents, my mother and my father were gone when they were little kids. So therefore, they had no idea about our history. So I was starting to write things down to give to them. And then when my mother gave me her memoir, and it was all written in Japanese, so I had to translate it. And in translating it, because she told me to translate it and give it to the kids. So in translating it, I realized that 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 it was very important to me to not just to my kids, and a lot of memories came back through that, and I realized too that, you know, even when you're sharing a life together, different generations live it differently. We interpret things differently. So when I read her memoir, I decided that I need to say something beside hers, that how I had lived those years, living beside her, but the things that were important to her were not as important to me. I had my own problems, you know, during these years. So I decided that I have to write to give to my sons, not only my mother's memoir, but my own. So the intention at the beginning was only to write to read to my kids. I wasn't planning to publish a book.
Okay, so I want to talk to you now. You did mention that you did intermarry, so your husband was not Japanese, and you talk about a time in Winnipeg when you were living in River Heights and you were having your two sons. You mentioned, and I hope I'm quoting it correctly, you envisioned your life like out of a white magazine, living a white life, but you would never be white because you're Japanese. Was that a turning point? And you do mention that that was a turning point in your realization of why identity and culture are so important.
Yeah. I think, you know, I never thought about, after I had started working, I was mixing in the larger community. Finally, I was feeling I was part of them. And then I married someone who was working at the same place as me. And I never thought anything, you know, of course I did, in the sense that I was one of the earliest intermarriages, you know, so of course it was always there. But I had no difficulty. Incredibly, my parents and his parents totally accepted it. We had no arguments. And that was really rare, you know, and especially too that it was about 10 years after we were released. You know, and here my father-in-law was a member of the Order of the British Empire, and he was a major decorated man, and served in the British and the Canadian Army. So for someone like him, and also his incredible wife, my mother-in-law, who didn't live long enough to see the children, they were so kind to me, just totally accepting. We had a big wedding with their relatives and everybody. And so I had started out my life so well without even thinking about the past. And yeah, so then while I was married and had my two sons, I came to the realization that I am still different, that my children were experiencing the fact that I was different, that their school children, their classmates, the classmates don't know their kids, so they hear this from their parents. So I began to realize that they were experiencing this, and I think I mentioned one about my 5-year-old second son who was told by his neighbor friend that he was Chinese, you know, meaning that he's Asian. And because in those days in Winnipeg, Japanese were just starting to come to the city. The only Asians they knew were Chinese. So anyways, that really made me begin to think about who I was again and how it's affecting my children. And I think that's when I began to change the way I was thinking. And it was rather a sad period because I was also working as a volunteer in school committees and things. But then during that time too, I was experiencing some rude remarks from the community. So, I had to kind of look at myself again and began to think again, who am I? I was born in Canada, don't know Japan, but who am I that I am treated in this way? And my children are now affected.
Mm-hmm. And now we're kind of seeing it all happen again, aren't we, Grace?
Exactly.
With the COVID.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you took a turn, and I found it fascinating too, not only about learning more about Winnipeg and the Japanese community, but also in Vancouver, the Powell Street neighborhood or whatever, and the festivals. You're back in Vancouver now. What is it like?
Well, excuse me. Until recently, I never heard. I can't say never, but I never concerned me that there were racists out there. But I have to admit that ever since the COVID-19 began, I remember one time I was with friends in Stevenston's Gary Park, and being yelled at by a middle-aged, huge guy, "Go back where you came from." And I didn't have, if I had expected it, I would have said back to him, "You go back where you come from." Where do you come from? So, and all I did was yell back, "Stupid," to him.
You got to be careful, Grace, but I know you've got some fight in you.
But it is true that we're going, not as much, but I think that because there will always be stupid people. Mm-hmm. And I had come to the conclusion that it's not my problem, it's their problem. Mm-hmm. That they don't have self-esteem. They need others to look down upon. So I came to the conclusion that don't think of it as your problem. Mm-hmm. It's their problem.
Well, no, most definitely. What is your relationship now with your sons and your grandchildren?
Yeah, actually, I have to admit that I felt I was an inadequate mother, even though I was doing my best. The reason being that I realized that my presence was affecting their lives. I felt negatively. When I think of it now, I should not have thought that way, mm-hmm. Because these are facts of Canadian life. And particularly my past was I was living in a Canadian racist society. But my sons were living in a better world. Even so, there were some people who were going to raise it. And when your sons are little, it's very difficult to explain to them. Mm-hmm. But I chose the path of educating myself to learn how to find the tools to handle this kind of thing. And so I started university studies as soon as the children, my two sons, started school. Mm-hmm. And as I say, when they started school, I realized they were dealing with it without knowing what they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And except that they know that their mother was treated as different. So when my older son was in first year university and my younger son was in high school, I started, before that, when as soon as they started school, I started going to evening classes to take some arts courses. And then when they were older, I think I mentioned that I went to a meeting of a group of people making art, and it was in a church basement, and I realized that I had some talent in art, that I like it and I enjoy it. So that's when I applied to enter into the BFA, it was called Bachelor of Fine Arts then, at the University of Manitoba School of Art. And I was accepted, and I went and I did it. And during that time, I was really still dealing with the issue of being a different mother. And I decided to take some more courses in Asian art history. And so I went to, and Asian art history was only taught at that time at University of BC. So my husband was very kind to let me do 2 years coming back and forth, but essentially living in residence in at UBC to do graduate studies in Asian art history. And that's when I came to the realization that up to then I was always very skeptical about who I was and what I was. And that's when I, for the first time, felt pride in my ancestry. And but then I decided that I had to pursue studies further, and that's when I separated. And it was very sad, but I felt that my sons were already knew who they were, and they were both doing very well. But even so, I think it was not a easy thing for them to face either. But I did that, and I think, you know, in retrospect, what a horrible thing I did as a mother. But I have very good relation with my two sons, and they've done really well themselves, you know, accomplished for themselves. And both of them, one is still living in Winnipeg, but he's a justice in the Court of Queen's Bench. And my other son is in Japan operating an English language school. So and I have 5 great-grandchildren, not great, 5 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild now. So I feel very lucky. But why I'm living in Vancouver is because when you separate, you have to find ways to make a living for yourself. And because I chose art does not furnish a lot of money.
No.
As we all know. And so for me, I had to move from place to place as I needed to because of work experience. And of course, the other thing that I may be jumping, but in the course of this period, I had experienced other issues, which during the time I was writing my memoir, I realized that within the memoir, sexism came into play.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It wasn't just about racism for a woman.
Mm-hmm. No, and yes, and that's very clear in your book too. Well, I have to say though, Grace, through all of this though, and as you're talking about your relationship with your sons, your grandchildren, your great-grandchild, the book, you know, maybe coming to peace with yourself too as well, you have to feel happy now, Grace. Or is there still things left unsaid? Or is there still things for you to do? You must feel happy.
Well, I am happy that the book, my memoir became a book to be shared with many others, because I had intended it only for my family when I was writing it. But I think that in time, well, other people, I shouldn't say other people because I have never shared it with anyone, except that I was very lucky to be introduced to a noted editor, Barbara Pulling. And Barbara read it, and she suggested that I should take it to a publisher. And I hadn't thought about it till then. I just wanted to produce something. I was going to self-publish to give to my kids. But when she suggested it and gave me a couple of names that I might access, so I chose Cape and Press because I knew they did a lot of women issues things. So, and they accepted it within 2 days, they accepted it. So that gave me courage to move forward with it. And so for me now, what I feel very happy about is that I hadn't realized it until then that my story was relevant to other young people too. And because of my age, through the years working in communities, I would say, and moving from here to here, doing curatorial work and that, I'm more involved with younger people. In fact, at my age, I hardly know hardly know many seniors.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
But I'm lucky because the young generations have been very supportive and given me a lot of courage.
No. Well, yeah, like you said, your story resonates with so many women. And again, just knowing who you are and learning more about your culture has certainly helped me a lot, you know, and piecing together a lot of the same history from my family. And I really thank you for this gift. It's been a wonderful, wonderful read, and all these different relationships now that we now have together. So thank you so much, Grace. It's been an honor. Can't wait for the next book.
I said, somebody said that to me the other day, and I said, yes, when I'm 100, I'll put another one out.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.